Welcome to the deep dive. So, if you've ever watched a courtroom drama, or maybe even been part of a really high-stakes personal dispute.
Like a tough custody case or a big financial divorce.
Exactly. You probably assume the winner is just the person with the most facts on their side.
And, you know, that assumption, according to the professional strategic guide we're looking at today, it completely misses the point.
Okay, that's so.
Well, these legal fights, especially the ones filled with emotion, they're not just about facts. They are a really sophisticated mix of legal rules, psychological tactics, and narrative control.
So let's unpack that. Our mission for this deep dive is to basically crack open this high-level playbook that lawyers use. It's not just about winning with evidence.
No, it's about shaping the entire environment where that evidence gets judged.
Okay. So we've distilled this guide into, what, 5 critical pillars?
That's right. We're going to look at building an ironclad defense, this aggressive strategy they actually call legal jujitsu.
I'm already interested in that one.
Oh, it's fascinating. Then there's mastering the human story and also the sort of surprising power of managing your client's emotions and even documenting their rehabilitation.
All right, let's jump right in with the foundation. The guide is crystal clear that nothing else works without this first pillar, establishing a solid defense.
And this is where the preparation becomes almost obsessive. It all starts with documentation.
Right, but this goes way beyond just proving the basic facts of the case.
It does. They talk about comprehensive data, collection financial records, communication logs, calendars, photos, everything. But the real strategic move, the thing they stress, is compiling evidence that proves responsible behavior.
Responsible behavior. Okay, that feels like the key pivot right there. It's not just about what the other side did wrong.
It's about proactively showing what you are doing right now. So if there are kids involved, you're documenting school pickups, doctor's appointments, consistent communication.
You're building a pattern of stability.
A traceable one. Clarity and traceability are non-negotiable. Every claim has to link back to a source instantly. That alone builds huge credibility before you've even made an argument.
And that credibility, I imagine, feeds directly into the witness strategy. You can't just call up your best friend.
Absolutely not. The witnesses have to speak to the client's character, their conduct, their integrity. It's a very careful selection process.
So who are they looking for?
The guide really pushes for neutral or expert witnesses. You know, a friend's testimony can get written off as biased pretty quickly.
Sure.
But a teacher, a colleague, financial advisor who's known you for years, someone who's seen you in a professional light, their words carry so much more weight because they seem objective.
And it's not just about witnesses. The guide talks about bringing in domain experts, psychologists, forensic accountants.
Right, and they're not just there for technical stuff. They're there to substantiate a claim that the client just can't prove on their own.
But here's what I found fascinating. The expert reports, they have to align seamlessly with the main story.
Oh, 100%. If an expert's finding contradicts even a tiny part of the client's narrative, the whole thing can unravel. It introduces doubt.
It's like they're proofreading the client's life story for consistency.
That's a great way to put it.
Speaking of finding those inconsistencies,
Yeah.
let's talk about the internal testing, mock trials. Why is this so critical, especially in these personal emotional cases?
Because when the emotions are high, it's so easy for both the lawyer and the client to get tunnel vision. They assume their version of events is the only one.
And a mock trial is designed to just shatter that assumption.
Completely. It's where you find the weak spots, the things you missed, the ambiguous points. It's basically a dress rehearsal for the worst possible cross-examination.
So you're challenging every assumption before a judge ever sees it. That deep rigor must give them the confidence to then, pivot to the offense.
Which brings us perfectly to the next phase. Once that defense is airtight, you move beyond just blocking punches. You start employing a subtle, intentional attack. Section 2. The attack theory.
Or, as the guide calls it, legal jujitsu.
Exactly. And that martial arts analogy is completely deliberate. It is not about brute force.
It's about redirection. You're not just denying what the other side says. You're taking their claims, their evidence,
the momentum.
and you're flipping it to expose their flaws, their contradictions.
Yes. It's about dismantling their credibility, using their own material. You don't ignore what they say, you weave it into your own story to make them look inconsistent or unstable.
The guide gives this perfect sort of example of this, the classic accusation of emotional instability.
A very difficult thing to disprove directly.
So instead of just denying it, the lawyer pivots.
Right. They highlight how the client proactively and voluntarily went and got therapy. They show documentation of consistent attendance of engagement.
Okay, but hold on. Isn't that a huge risk? I mean, if you bring up therapy,
You'd think so, right?
yeah, aren't you just admitting, yep, the problem is real? How do you walk that tightrope?
And that's the brilliance of legal jujitsu. The focus shifts entirely. It's no longer about the existence of a problem in the past. It's about the response to it in the present.
Ah, so you're not denying the issue.
Not at all. You're using the documented, measured steps of rehabilitation to prove you are mature, accountable, and forward-looking. The old instability actually becomes evidence of your new strength and responsibility.
That focus on the human response is a perfect bridge to Section 3, which is all about narrative mastery, building that compelling story.
Because at the end of the day, all the evidence in the world doesn't matter if the judge doesn't trust the person telling the story.
You're dealing with human decision makers.
Exactly. So the lawyer has to humanize the client,
Yeah.
make them seem relatable, responsible. They illustrate real experiences, sacrifices, aspirations, not just a list of legal points.
And there's a structure to it, like a three-act play. The beginning establishes stability, good character, often going back years before the conflict.
Then the middle presents the dispute. But, and this is critical, it has to be presented logically, anchored in that documentation we talked about. No sudden emotional outbursts.
And the third act, the purposeful future. That seems like the most strategic part.
It really is. It's all about the client's constructive, specific plans for after the case is resolved. How will they build a stable future? How will they ensure the kids thrive? It reframes them from a victim of the past into an architect of the future.
And underlying all of this is, again, factual consistency.
It's non-negotiable. Every claim has to link back to evidence. If one part of the story falls apart, the entire structure of trust just collapses with it.
So you present emotional realities, but the guide gives a huge warning here. No dramatization, no exaggeration.
Right, which is a tricky balance. And that tightrope walk brings us to Section 4, psychological intelligence.
This part is fascinating. A lawyer's first job is building a case, but their second job is almost being a temporary psychologist for their client.
It really is. The first task the guide lists is dissipating anger. The lawyer has to manage the client's frustration, their anxiety, and guide them away from those reactive emotions.
So they're coaching them to respond with, what, neutrality?
Strategic neutrality, because the court's perception of your emotional state is a form of evidence. The goal is to position the client as calm, solution-focused, and reasonable.
Qualities that courts love.
Explicitly, highly emotional people can be seen as erratic or unstable. A controlled posture just screams credibility.
And this gets even more intense when the other side actually lands a punch, when they successfully allege some kind of fault.
That's when the rehabilitation strategy kicks into high gear. The lawyer doesn't try to hide the mistake.
So what do?
They encourage the client to immediately take proactive, demonstrable steps. That could mean enrolling in co-parenting courses, starting financial planning seminars, committing weekly therapy.
And documenting everything along the way.
It has to be formal. Certificates of completion, attendance records signed by a professional, progress reports. You collect all of it and you present it to the court.
So the strategy is to make the client's current mature behavior completely overshadow the past mistake.
It's incredibly powerful. It neutralizes the accusation and reframes the person entirely. It basically says, yes, that happened, but look at the verifiable proof of how I fixed it. You're using the present to redefine the past.
And all that documented strength, that narrative control, allows you to enter the final phase from a position of power. Section 5, strategic negotiation.
Because even with a killer case, diplomacy is almost always better than the coin toss of a trial.
And this starts with sizing up the opponent.
Meticulously. You have to analyze their goals, their real weaknesses, their pressure points. Are they scared of a public trial? Are they running out of money? That assessment tells you how to negotiate.
And the compromises you offer aren't just random.
No, they're tactical. The guide says you offer things that seem fair, but that actually protect your client's non-negotiables. The custody schedule, a key asset. It's the perception of concession without sacrificing anything vital.
Which brings us to a tool everyone should know, the BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement.
Yes. Preparing a strong BATNA is the ultimate source of leverage. It means knowing, with cold, hard clarity, What is the absolute worst case scenario for you if this thing goes to trial?
Because if you know your worst possible outcome,
Then you know exactly how far you can push in the
yeah.
negotiation. You won't get cornered. You won't accept a bad deal just because you're scared or tired.
So the goal is to use this whole strategy, the evidence, the narrative, the psychological control, to get a better, more predictable outcome through negotiation than you ever could in court.
Exactly.
So we've just done this deep dive into a guide that treats a legal case less like a debate and more like a full-blown strategic campaign. It really shows that winning is about so much more than just having the facts.
It is. And if this entire professional strategy puts such a heavy, heavy emphasis on managing current behavior, documenting personal growth, and crafting a human-centered narrative just to build trust, what does that tell you about the nature of truth in these cases?
That's a powerful question. What does it mean when the winning strategy relies so much on proving responsible behavior and managing perception today, instead of just analyzing what happened in the past? That's the question we hope you take away from this deep dive.